Joining me now, former FBI Special Agent Stuart Kaplan. Stuart, wonderful to see you again. Let's just cut right to the chase, Stuart. Do you think the raid was politically motivated?
I think certainly if you look at the optics and the perception, the takeaway is that the FBI was used as a political weapon to neutralize the former sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump. No doubt about it. We're having this conversation about privileged documents now. The warrant, the affidavit in and of itself addresses that, the last 2 pages. And now here we are. He's seeking a special master to try to marshal and put the genie back in the bottle. Certainly the FBI anticipated it. That's why it was included in the affidavit. So my takeaway is it was politically motivated.
Does the redacted affidavit tell us anything about whether the raid was warranted?
I think it tells us more about what was not in the warrant or what was not in the affidavit. I think my takeaway is the reality is that the breadth and the scope and the broadness of this particular warrant certainly supports the optics and the perception that the government was more interested in going in on a fishing expedition. The fact remains these documents, these boxes were at Mar-a-Lago for at least a year, year and a half. They knew that. Unless there's some smoking gun with respect to whether or not individuals or an individual was in the process of selling or disseminating or doing something with these documents to cause an exigent circumstance or the immediacy of the most intrusive tool that the FBI has at its disposal, that is the execution of a search warrant. To me, again, the optics is this was political, but they went in very, very candidly, under the auspices of a national security threat, but it looks like a fishing expedition to me.
I don't remember a raid on Hillary Clinton when she had classified information, very top secret as well, eyes only top secret on an open server, an unguarded server that could be accessed by dozens of people. That eventually part of it was hammered to death. Here's what James Comey said about that whole incident with her servers right before the 2016 election. He said 7 email chains concern matters that were classified at the top secret special access program level when they were sent and received. All of these emails were housed on unclassified personal servers, not even supported by full-time security staff. Now, of course, he went on to say he wasn't going to prosecute. and here we have an incident which is not as bad as what Hillary Clinton had, and they're talking about prosecuting. So what's going on?
I mean, certainly her situation is so much more egregious. The reality is, obviously, somehow someone sent those documents or that information to her personal server. That in of itself was never really determined as to who sent those documents to a personal server. And so here you have Donald Trump, who obviously, clearly did not pack up the Oval Office. Someone packed it up on his behalf. They've been in the boxes since they left the Oval Office a year and a half ago. So the threat with respect to Hillary Clinton, the fact that those documents, that information was disseminated through the internet onto the server is a much greater risk with respect to that scenario than boxes taken out of the Oval Office, which still remained in the boxes in a location that the government was well aware of.
Yeah, and the problem with the affidavit, the redacted version, which, you can see a little bit at the beginning, a little bit at the end, but the whole middle's missing, is that we know in the past affidavits have been used at least once where somebody actually pled guilty to putting misinformation in the affidavit in order to get a warrant. That was FBI attorney Kevin Kleinsmith. He pled guilty for false statements in that Crossfire Hurricane campaign, the so-called Russian collusion investigation. Could the same thing have happened here? And will we ever know whether it happened? There's Kevin Kleinsmith.
Well, to your point exactly, no one can test the trustworthiness of the affidavit itself. In fact, to be able to challenge the trustworthiness of the context in which the information that was provided in the affidavit may never come to light unless an individual is formally charged. So given the present state of this affidavit, it is likely or possible or probable that it will remain exactly in the same state as it is until such time as someone is charged. If no one is charged, we will never know. And to me, I think the the problem that I have is no one can challenge the legitimacy of the information to which this warrant was based upon. That's a big problem for me.
Stuart, we really have to go, but so as quickly as you can. But how do we straighten out the FBI right now? It's obviously been politicized at a certain level. Do we need another church commission with a Republican Congress? I mean, how do we do that?
Simply, when Jim Comey was escorted out of the FBI headquarters back in May of 2017, the mistake was that everybody within his circle should have also been escorted out. It has been allowed to permeate this political environment. It is unfortunate. I am sorry to say that the optics, the perception is horrendous. It needs to be fixed today.
Stuart Kaplan, great to see you. Thank you for your service, Stuart.